Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Squid Game Season 2 Episode 4. It's called Six Legs, so spoilers for the episode as always. So yeah, this is an interesting one. It's the middle episode of the season, which feels far too quick to be here, so it's going in very fast. And to add to that, I was kind of in shock when it cut to the credits at the end. I was not prepared for the episode to be over. It ends in a total cliffhanger, maybe an omen for how the season's going to end, given it's one big story split in two. But that's not to say that I'm saying that's a negative. I think it was actually kind of refreshing in a sense that we got like a round of the next game. We got to experience how it worked. But then we didn't get the next part where everyone is actually, like all the main characters might actually survive. We got all the red shirts going first. And just as some of the characters we know are about to play, it cuts to credits. And I think that is an interesting tactic because it lets me kind of think about and be excited for how the actual game's going to go when people can actually pull it off. So it is a different game. It's a new game, which I kind of expected. I think there's a chance they still might repeat some, but especially early on in this episode when they're asking for the advice and he's saying pick triangle. I did laugh at the little nightmare he has where he picks the triangle and he gets like a really complex triangle with lots of little triangles in it and freaks out because, oh no, I've doomed them all because I said this was the toughest. But it almost does feel like they intentionally picked a different game so that his advice wouldn't work. That said, though, like I said last time, I'm pretty sure in Season 1 there was an implication that there was multiple games. In fact, they kind of referenced how we knew that in this episode, because there's one of the subplots that kind of comes back in this one is that some of the soldiers are selling off organs from the dead players. That was actually, I think, how we learned, because one of the, they even mention it here, where one of the players last time was a doctor, and he was helping them in exchange for information about what the next game was going to be. It kind of sounded from the way they talked about that in Season 1, at least the implication I always got, is that there's a big list of games it could be, and they pick from that list, right? They rotate some in and out with each round. So whether or not they intentionally changed it up because they knew Gi-hun had information about the next game, if it was the same, or if it just happened to be, no, it was going to be different no matter what. Open for interpretation, open for speculation. No, I thought this was mostly a good episode. I liked a lot of things it was doing here. I will say that this one had a bit more of an awkward pacing, and not because of where it ends. I have no, as much as it was a surprise when it cut to the credits, I don't have a problem with that. Honestly, the pacing issues I felt in this episode, I think are almost entirely at the result of the real world stuff. Back in the mainland, seeing Jun-ho and some of the other characters and what they're up to. Particularly, there's a scene with the other guy and the sailor, the captain of the boat that we're using, who are just sitting in a restaurant and basically talking about how, oh, this is all real, by the way. We know someone that's on the island playing the game, and it's just that conversation. I think the weird thing about this scene for me, and why it felt a bit tedious, is that unless the sailor turns out to be the person who's betrayed them and is actually kind of feeding information back to the powers that be, the people who run the games, I don't see much purpose for this scene, because I was kind of like giving them some side eye here, because this conversation felt very suspicious that he seemed to know a lot about how they were looking for the island, and then, the other guy confirms a lot of it. It felt suspicious to me, and it's the only way I could think of in hindsight that it'll be important later, this scene, because otherwise this scene has absolutely nothing new in it for us, the audience. They're just recounting information we already know. So, in a weird, it feels quite clunky as a result, because either it's useless, and that's a problem in and of itself, or it's not useless, but the only thing that makes it useful is if it's teasing that one of these characters is actually betraying the rest of them. And that feels quite clunky because it feels too obvious, because that's the only purpose it could have. So I didn't really like that scene. And the scene with Jun-ho in the police station where he basically like resigns and pisses off the captain or whoever it is. That stuff was okay. I didn't feel particularly strongly about it. It felt like we're just checking in with those characters because we're supposed to check in with them rather than because there's anything meaningful for them to do in this particular episode. Don't get me wrong, I'm excited for where some of that stuff in the mainland with those characters might go, but I don't think anything here was really anything except, oh, we have to keep tabs on them and make it feel like we've had a little slice of them this episode so we don't forget about them. So that's maybe the most disappointing part of the episode. What is interesting, though, in the first half of the episode is how the front man, or number one, whatever we want to call him, I'm probably still going to call him the front man just because it's what I've gotten used to calling him, but the fact that he actively chooses to engage in conversation with Gi-hun and talks to him about the games, about being here before, asking his advice, very interesting. And this idea that the front man wants to get close to Gi-hun, I actually think there's some complex motivations here, because I think part of it genuinely is that he wants to get to know Gi-hun. I don't think it's just purely about controlling the situation. I think he's seen something in Gi-hun based on his decisions and actions on the build-up and then during the first game of this Squid Game season that has made him want to understand him and see how he ticks. I'm not saying that's the only reason why he's doing it, but I do think he genuinely is interested in getting to know him. At least that's the vibe I was getting from all the scenes that he shared with him this episode. And what's interesting is, of course, Gi-hun gets a little pissy at him because ultimately, because he was the last one to vote, he basically made the choice for everyone, whether they go or they stay. And he kind of tries to justify it, does the front man, by saying, oh, what if like I run into some of these people years from now and their life is still shit? They might hate me for this. They might, like, I was thinking of that scenario. He tries to give kind of an explanation beyond just, I'm greedy and I wanted to stay. Obviously, we know the motivations are a lot more complex than that because we know who he actually is. But interesting stuff. The more fascinating couple of things, though, that came out of all this is that he does seem to try and strike up a friendship with Gi-hun. He goes to apologize to him. And perhaps most importantly, he seemingly uses some real truth, because we know to some extent about his wife being sick, although this is not something that's happening right now. It's something that happened some time ago. Thanks to the commenter who reminded me of some of this stuff a couple of reviews ago, because I was questioning what I remembered about any of this. And he basically says, you know, I'm doing this for my wife who's sick, I'm out of options, I borrowed money, and like we know there's some truth to this, even though it's not what's happening right now. And I thought that was an interesting tactic that shows that he is very capable of making it sound convincing, because he is using truth. The emotion that he shows as he's saying these things is coming from a real place. It's real stuff. So it comes across as convincing, and I think it's interesting that he is tactically using the idea that Gi-hun is an idealist, that Gi-hun is this person who wants to help people, and he's been learning that throughout his actions so far. And ultimately, this play to like, oh, this will be what makes him trust me and want to, you know, keep me as a friend, is if I appeal to this sense of sympathy. If I give him the, you know, the sob story, for lack of a better term, Gi-hun will feel empathy for me, and he will, you know, he will build trust, basically. Like I think that's a very smart tactic. It's kind of malicious, given that we know it is a tactic, right? And again, I think there's the possibility that he in some way does respect Gi-hun and wants to be his friend, regardless of any lies that he's doing and any other things he's trying to achieve. I think that could actually be in there as well as everything else. But it is still tactical. He's still giving the story that he knows Gi-hun will in some way respond to emotionally. So I think that's a really fascinating little scene. The other big scene with him, of course, is the scene where Thanos the rapper, and it's a weird thing to say, they make it very clear that he's named after the Marvel character this episode, by the way, because they reference snapping the universe in half and the Infinity Stones. Like, there's also he seems to dip into English occasionally just for shits and giggles. I'm not really sure. At first I thought maybe like there was like a couple of words that there's no Korean equivalent for, so he's just saying the English. But then he was just kind of slipping into English for like a sentence here or there, and I'm like, no, there's definitely ways of saying that in Korean. I'm sure there is. But regardless, he ends up getting into a fight with the crypto guy, and it quite brutal as well, where because you know his like promoter henchman is like holding him back as well, so it's quite a one-sided fight, and it's actually the front man who steps up and walks over and says, "You should be ashamed, you're doing this in front of elders, in front of people who are eating," and makes a bit of a speech. Thanos does not take kindly to this, and basically we find out that the front man's kind of a badass, and very efficiently takes out both Thanos and his henchmen with some very, again, much like how he's communicating with Gi-hun and like targeting the right things to say to him. Physically in a fight, he's doing the exact same thing here. He does it with as little physicality as possible. He does like this little quick kick to like the shin of the henchman character, and he goes down instantly. It was like a surgical strike, a torpedo that took as little effort as possible, but was extremely effective. And then, you know, flips over Thanos and like bends his, or not snaps his wrist, but, you know, puts him into a wrist lock. And it actually leans down and sort of starts to choke him, and it makes Thanos sort of apologize, and eventually the front man lets go. It's interesting though, he does get very angry in this episode, or in this scene, the front man. It's like he loses himself, like he might actually go through with killing him, but is able to sort of bring himself back down in the nick of time, and is able to hold back. So it maybe suggests that there is a rage in there that is being provoked, and perhaps specifically there's a moment right before he gets physical where Thanos says something to the effect of, "Save the lectures for your own children," and that makes the front man go, "What did you say?" And it's like he's triggered by the idea of being reminded of possibly having kids. That's I think a sensitive subject for him, clearly based on this scene. And I think this played out very interestingly, especially since when he stands up at the end of this fight, the entire room starts applauding. They see him as a hero. And it's very funny that we know that he is the opposite of Gi-hun, in the sense that he is the one representing the games, and he's on the inside with insider knowledge. And Gi-hun is the one in the games who's got insider knowledge because he's played it before, but they're for and against. They literally, one's an X, one's an O. But he's won the crowd here. The front man has kind of made everyone think he's a bit of a hero here. So I think that's quite interesting, which I guess leads me to the weird comedy thing about this episode that I suppose is maybe something I wasn't completely vibing with. Gi-hun's friend, he apparently was a Marine, and this other character who we didn't really, I mean, maybe he was, you know, I'm sure he was there in the background last episode, but I don't think he got featured heavily, shows up and is very enthusiastic and says he wants to be sort of with them and sort of, you know, follow their orders and, you know, align with this little group that's kind of forming between Gi-hun, the front man, Gi-hun's friend. And turns out he's got a Marine tattoo of some kind, and it turns out so does Gi-hun's friend, which immediately makes this slightly younger guy start saluting and like saying his regiment number and whatever else he's saying. And the music. So the one complaint I had about last episode was the song choice during the game was really kind of just a little bit distracting. I think this episode is actually much worse in that respect, where there's like multiple distracting songs. There's one during the game later on that I found distracting. And in this comedy music that's playing, and it's comedy music. It's music that says this is a silly pair of characters doing silly things. And Gi-hun does react like it's silly. He kind of like sighs and rolls his eyes a little bit like, oh, what is going on? But yeah, this guy is pledging his allegiance to the team here, which is something, I guess. So we've got another character in the mix. So no, but they're both like questioning if they should intervene during the fight. And there's a nice little punchline to this where at the end of the fight, where they say, oh, maybe he's a Marine too, and then they both like hide their tattoos. Like they don't want to have the expectations of what the front man can do placed upon them because they happen to be Marines. They're like, oh no, we'll hide that fact. If that's what he is, and they don't even know if he is, but if that's what he is, we don't want to be associated with him because people may expect us to be as good as that, so we're not going to do it. So that was a funny little beat at the end. I'm not sure how I felt about this pair of characters' comedic kind of like back and forth and the tone that all of their conversations take. It happens again later when they're having to pick teams where the younger guy's like, I'll go find a fifth member for our team, and salutes and goes off to find them, and it's all played for pure comedy. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it's also not a big deal either. It's a small thing. It's a couple of scenes. Maybe it'll grow on me with more episodes. I suspect they'll both survive purely because they're on Gi-hun's team, And this game seems to be you either live or die. Like all of your team lives or all your team dies. There's no mix and matching. So yeah, we'll see how that progresses. Before we get to the game itself as well, it's worth mentioning we see a little bit more of Newell, and that's the stuff that ties into the organs plot. As it turns out, they're very upset that all of the bodies they're getting are too dead to take their organs. They want them to be technically still alive when they take them, because the organs are no good if the body's been completely dead. And they're upset because it seems like a bunch of the people who died in the first game were shot in the head. And not even that, some people were shot by another soldier, were then shot in the head again by our character, number 11. It's funny, after this episode, I remember she's number 11 now. So yeah, No Yule is number 11. But she is brought up to the vice president of the games. I don't know what to call him, but he's the one that's wearing the all black version of the soldier suit. So he's not wearing what the front man wears. He's got a square or a circle in his face. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but he's wearing a black tracksuit as opposed to the pink ones. But he seems to be running things now that the front man is inside the game itself. And he basically says, "Hey, I'm responsible for giving you this chance, and I said I'd help you find your kid. What's changed," kind of thing. And grills her out and says, "Hey, are you going to do what you're told?" And what he's telling her is, stop killing them completely, because we want to harvest some organs. And she actually just says no. I think No Yule's a very interesting, exciting character to me, because obviously we had the twist of what she was at the end of episode 2, but I think this like blatant defying the boss here is quite interesting. Now, admittedly, this boss is doing something he's not supposed to. There's a chance of them getting caught, so maybe she is looking out for herself, but it does seem like she's taken maybe more of a strict moral stance, and points out that she was told when she joined up to do this that she was killing people who had no hope left, and that she was effectively putting them out of their misery. Now, admittedly, I think you have to kind of be a bit naive or like convince yourself that that's true. It's hard to believe that anyone could truly believe that. But it does show us in this episode that one of the guys she killed last episode, and I never realized this. I'm glad they spelled this out to me, because I did not recognize the guy's face, because I didn't remember him. Like I remember the dad existing, but I didn't remember the dad of the episode 2, the dad of the little girl who went to hospital. I didn't remember him well enough to recognize him in the tracksuits during the games. So I'm glad they showed a little moment there of her kind of dealing with the fact that she murdered this little girl's dad, and it's not quite fitting with who she was told was in these games. Like, this is maybe the first time she's recognized someone who's playing and is like, wait a minute, I just took that girl's dad away, and now she has no one, potentially. I mean, maybe the mother's around, I don't know. They didn't mention that in episode 2. But things are pretty rough if he's in the Squid Games. I mean, I think that's fair to say. So that's also pretty interesting. And we see her again later on, like, go out of her way to, like, finish a kill during the games towards the end, where she says, "Open the box," and then shoots the guy in the head, which got a little chuckle out of me. I actually think it's got a little bit of a dark humor, at least for my taste. But they're all the other tracksuits are all looking at each other, being like, boss man's not going to like that. So interesting that they're still doing this organ stuff. I couldn't remember if that's something they just had to stop completely last season. But I guess we got our answer here. They're still trying to do that and make some extra money on the side, seemingly. Of course, the boss character, the vice president, or whatever we want to call him, he does seem to like try and frame it like we're saving people with these organs. We're doing a good thing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the black market and selling these for presumably a very high price because they're dodgy organs. Anyway, the game. We have to talk about the game. So we have the team building part of it first, which is they have to go into teams of 5. This is very reminiscent of 1 or 2 scenes that we got in season 1 where they had to split into teams. And I think I liked it a lot there. I liked it a lot here, seeing who people end up with who. Seeing kind of some of the dynamics at play. Like, no one wants the old woman, for example. So we have that dealt with where her son refuses to not stick by her. So they end up in a team with other people who no one wants, and that includes the trans character, Hyun-joo. I'm trying to remember some of the characters' names. I kind of caught this one when she said it towards the end. The one that I did catch, actually, who I've not spoken about yet, is Jun-hee, the pregnant woman. I caught her name because she mentioned it early on and kind of admits to a few people in the episode that she is pregnant. The old woman actually can tell and goes up to like offer some of her food because she's eating for two. She says she's Jusun, which I found that very hard to believe, even though she could just be wrong, of course, but like I don't think, even if she is like holding her stomach in somehow, I feel like it would be more I mean, again, admittedly, I don't know how effectively you can hide a pregnancy. I really don't. I've never tried to hide one, so I don't know. But I feel like she would be more obviously pregnant if she was Jusun, would be my assumption. But regardless, she does tell the others during the team building, where she comes up to Gi-hun's team, who have got 4, except for the fact that the soldier boy has went and got a 5th, some red shirt, and she comes up and says, "Hey, can I please be your 5th?" And says, "Please, no one else will help me. I'm pregnant." And like, obviously Gi-hun, again, the good guy that he is, was never going to turn her down, I think, at this point. I think that's the interesting, because we have like a team of and I don't mean this in a bad way, but a team of misfits, right? We have the team of people that no one else wanted, which is, the old lady, the trans character Hyun-joo, and the religious lady, or who I'm going to call the shaman, because they refer to her as a shaman in this episode a couple times. And she has a couple of moments in this episode where she, again, just is looking down and kind of like judging things. But the big thing is really just how much she's praying towards the end of the episode, where it feels like she's breaking down because she thinks they're all going to die. Whereas it's Hyun-joo who actually starting to give the others a pep talk. And there's another member in the team who's a sort of smaller woman who no one seemed to want to team up with. And that's actually kind of a sweet moment in the episode when she asks Hyun-joo if they can be in a team together. It felt kind of sweet because Hyun-joo had just been turned down by some guys who just took one look at her and said, "No, we don't want you," very awkwardly and uncomfortably. So it felt kind of nice that someone asked her, and then for her to kind of return the favor by giving her this pep talk right before the end, I thought was quite good. So that was like, it made me want this team to win, and I'm sure they're going to, because it feels like a lot of prominent characters are on the team, so it seems like they're probably going to survive. At least, I mean, we're only in episode 4, so I think they will, but we'll see. So yes, and was it face Jun-hee, the pregnant girl? Jun-hee did have a scene with the crypto guy, the father of the child, and he just was kind of annoyed that she didn't get an abortion because she didn't have money to take care of the baby. He tries to reach out to her and says that he was going through a rough time, but she, pulls his hand away from her shoulder and says she doesn't want his help. And then, and again, in the team building process, says that she doesn't want to be on his team. He tries to make the offer first. "Hey, let's be on the same team. Let's do this together." And she says, "No, I'll be in anyone's team but yours." So that bridge ain't mended, and it may never be mended. I don't know. I don't know if the crypto guy can get the redemption story, but we'll see. I mean, the show has pulled off some cool character turns before, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. So yeah, I think it does a good job of giving us like 2 teams of notable characters who are the good characters, and then you've got a team that has the rapper on it. It's got Thanos on it, who's probably going to live just because we have to have the villainous one for longer in the season. Very lucky that his team's going to be good at all these little games, because the games this time, and I say games plural because it's technically a collection of mini games, which, even though I don't play this game, my first thought was, oh, you're playing Mario Party. When they said there was a series of mini games, that was what my mind went to. But yeah, there's basically a circular little track made up of 5 colors, like a little rainbow and a circle, where they go down, and it's kind of like it's a team game where each member of the team has to do one mini game each. So they have to decide which player's doing which game, and then they go around. One of them is the thing that the recruiter always played with them, with the sort of the envelope looking cards. But there's other ones. One's like a spinning top where they put a little rope around it and they have to get it to spin by like tossing it out from up high. One's just like throwing a rock at another rock, which they said at one point this seems like a hard one and quite difficult. I don't know, it seems like the easiest one to me. I feel like if all of these 5 games, unless there's like a rule that I'm not quite getting, I feel like just throwing a rock and hitting the other rock is the one that I feel like I'd have the best chance at. But maybe I'm missing one of the rules that makes it a little harder or something. Maybe you have to like bounce the rock off the ground first or something. I don't know. But that's one of the games. There's one where they're throwing dice, these like colored dice up in the air and catching them. You have to do it in a certain order, and it ends with having to throw up all 5 at once and catching them all in the back of your hand, and then throwing them up and catching them all at the one time again in the palm of your hand. So I'd never heard of this game. It seems to be something that, like, because they mention here it's typically a girls' game, because they're excited that they've got a girl in the team. Gi-hun's friends, oh, it's good we've got a girl because that's a girls' game, and then and then she's like, yeah, I've never played this before. I've never even played this once. So, and then it turns out that the Soldier Boy is like, I can play that. I grew up with 3 sisters. And it's like he has to explain why he knows how to play it and why he might be good at it. And of course, Gi-hun's friend just says, "Oh, of course, that's how you know it." It's like, I feel like you're like really he was so scared of being judged here for knowing how to play this game that is perceived as a girl's game. So you know, like, I'm kind of almost rooting for him now just because of that little like shitty attitude that was kind of creeping in there. We never get. I mean, they mentioned the 5th game, but we never got to see it here because neither team that we see play gets to it. So, you know, there's that. Was that all of them? I may have missed one, but if I miss one, then whatever. I'll definitely talk about it next episode when I'm talking about how all of our main characters are playing it. Here, so 2 teams are racing, but there's also a time limit. So I'm assuming that if one team wins, the other team just instantly loses. I think that would be what happens here. Maybe they'll prove me wrong next time. But if neither team gets to the finish line before the time runs out, and to get to the finish line you have to complete all 5 games, then you just get shot. And that happens to both teams, even though one team is definitely a game ahead of the other, or 2 games by the end, because the second team is just like cannot get past the stone throwing game. Even when he does it, he gets disqualified because his foot was over the line, so they still have to they have to all hop across because they're all chained together and pick the stone back up, hop back to the starting line and try it again. And he finally gets it when they've got like 10 seconds left after he's wet himself, and he's just sort of crying and saying he's happy that he finally did it, but then they get shot because there's not enough time left for the rest of the games. So, like I said, the music at the start of this was a bit too jovial, I think, for my taste, based on like the tone of it, where I knew it was going to end up going. But it got more tense as it went along, especially since you're like, oh, the first team of the 2 is going to like succeed. We're going to see what a successful run looks like because they're doing much better. But by the time they get to the spinning top, they don't have much time left, and they don't quite get to that last game. The soldier who's standing there with the final game is like standing waiting to give it to them, but the time runs out, so they step back off the track, and it's like, no, your time's up, and they all get killed. And it's around here actually that I really like this moment, is one of the people who had voted to leave stands up and yells, "We're all going to die because you idiots voted to stay," and is mad at the people who voted to stay. I appreciated that moment. It makes sense that when shit got real again, and despite the fact that they'd lived through the first game, as soon as they saw more people get shot and how difficult this next batch of games was, it made sense that some of the people who voted to leave are going to be starting to hold a grudge against the people who voted to stay. And I think that divide might heat up a little bit after this next game. With whoever's left after the next game, depending on who survives, that could really heat up a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know, interesting stuff. I still enjoyed this episode quite a bit. I think there's some really fun stuff. I think the character building for the characters inside the games is mostly really good. I enjoyed the frontman scenes with him interacting with the others. Even when he sort of flubs a little bit and uses Gi-hun's name, but he's able to explain that he heard his friend say it earlier, so it's fine. But it's like, okay, all right, he almost slipped. Like, I'm kind of, if I was to make a guess right now, I would say that the cliffhanger of this season might be the moment Gi-hun realizes who this guy is, and then cut to black. We don't get to see what happens next until season 3. No one tell me if I'm right, but if I was to make a guess right now, that would be it. I could be wrong though. Could be wrong. So that said though, real world stuff I think dragged the pacing down a little bit and was actively not that interesting compared to everything else that was going on. I do think that Nuel is a fascinating character, and her kind of rebelling against not even the powers that be that are running the game, but she's rebelling against her direct supervisor who's doing something he shouldn't be. So that conflict with the others, despite the fact that she, they've laid the seed that she might be sympathetic to the people playing the game down the line, with her realizing she shot someone she recognized and feels regret about it and is now questioning who she's like been told to kill. But they could go either way with that. She could go further down the rabbit hole, or she could be on a path to being like eventually in a position to help some of the players if she believes at a certain point that they are being unfairly treated. Like even like beyond the rules of the game, where maybe she sees that like something unjust is happening and she can't stand back anymore. But it really depends what they want to do with this character, because I genuinely don't know for sure, and I think that's part of what makes her so interesting. So it's very different to someone infiltrating like we had in season 1, where we had someone pretending to be one of the masked soldiers, but was secretly the another main character. Here, this is a character who's supposed to be here, but is starting to like have problems with the system and the others that she's surrounded by. So, no, good stuff. All right, not as tight as last episode though. I will say that it's not as tight as last episode. But hey, we'll see what happens next time on the Squid Game. So let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support all the content both here and over on Male Fuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. Go check out those if you haven't. But that is me. So thank you very much once again for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?